Welcome back to the Exponential English Podcast. Today, I want to show you a very powerful way to improve your English speaking by yourself. Yes, by yourself. You do not need a conversation partner. You do not need a teacher sitting next to you. You do not need to wait for the perfect chance to speak. You can start today. You can start at home. You can start with your phone, your laptop, or any video or audio that you like. And the technique is very simple. It is called imitation. But this is not just copying sounds like a robot. It is something much better. It is listening to a message, understanding it, and then saying the same idea again in your own way. This is one of the best ways to become a better speaker. Why? Because speaking is not only about knowing words, it is not only about grammar rules, it is not only about pronunciation. Speaking is about building ideas, it is about expressing meaning, it is about saying what you want to say in a natural way, and imitation helps you practice all of that at the same time. It helps you notice sentence structure. It helps you learn useful vocabulary. It helps you feel grammar instead of only studying grammar. And it helps you become more comfortable speaking out loud. That is why this technique is so useful. Let's talk about what imitation really means. Many learners think imitation means listening to a native speaker and repeating the exact same words. That can still help a little, but the deeper version of imitation is different. You listen to a short conversation, a sentence, or a small speech. Then you try to give the same message again, but in your own words. So you are not only copying, you are rebuilding the idea. That is the magic. For example, imagine you hear this sentence: I didn't go out this weekend because I was too tired from work, so I stayed home and watched movies. Now, if you only repeat it word for word, that is simple repetition, but imitation would sound more like this. I stayed home this weekend because work made me really tired and I just relaxed and watched some movies. The meaning is almost the same, but the words are a little different. This is excellent speaking practice. Why? Because now your brain has to do real work. Your brain must understand the message. Then it must choose words. Then it must build a sentence. Then it must speak. That is real language training, and the more you do this, the better you become. You start to feel how English works. You begin to notice patterns. You hear how ideas are connected. You hear how native speakers organize thoughts. You hear which words often go together. You hear natural expressions and idioms. And slowly, those patterns start to become part of your own English. This is also why imitation can help you learn grammar in a very natural way. A lot of learners worry too much about grammar. They think, first, I need to memorize all the rules. First, I need to master every tense. First, I need perfect grammar before I speak. But that is not how real communication grows. Of course, grammar matters. Yes, grammar is important. But many parts of grammar can become natural through repeated exposure and speaking practice. Think about children learning their first language. They do not begin by studying grammar charts. They do not start with complicated explanations. They listen. They notice. They imitate. They try. They make mistakes. They try again. And little by little, grammar becomes natural to them. You can learn in a similar way. When you do imitation, you hear correct English again and again. Then you try to produce similar English yourself. So you are not only reading grammar, you are experiencing grammar. You begin to feel what sounds right. You begin to say things like, I've never tried that before. She used to live there. If I had more time, I would study more. At first, maybe these patterns feel difficult, but after hearing and imitating them many times, they start to feel normal. This is one of the biggest benefits of imitation. Now, I want to show you how to practice this in an easy and smart way. Do not begin with something too hard. This is very important. A lot of learners choose material that is too advanced. Then they feel stressed. Then they feel slow. Then they quit. So instead, use an easy to hard method. Start small, then grow. This is the best way. Step 1 is to imitate very small portions, maybe only one short phrase, maybe one sentence. Listen carefully. Understand the meaning. Pause. Then say the same message in your own words. Let me give you an example. You hear this. I usually drink coffee in the morning before I start work. You could imitate it like this. I normally have coffee in the morning before working. Or, I drink coffee first thing in the morning before I begin my job. Very simple. You are practicing meaning, vocabulary, and sentence structure. When this feels comfortable, go to step 2. Now imitate larger portions. Maybe 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences, maybe one longer idea. For example, imagine you hear this. Last weekend, I visited my cousin in another city. We ate at a small restaurant and spent the evening walking around the downtown area. Now you can try to say, I went to see my cousin in a different city last weekend. We had food at a small place, and later we walked around downtown. Again, the message stays the same, but the language becomes yours. That is the goal. Then, step 3 is full delivery. This is where you listen to a short speech, story, or explanation, and then try to give the whole message by yourself. Not word for word, not perfectly, just clearly, naturally, in your own English. This kind of practice is amazing because now you are training memory, speaking, organization, and fluency together. You are learning how to hold ideas in your mind and express them in English. That is a real speaking skill. Now maybe you are thinking, what if I make mistakes? Good. Make mistakes. That is part of the process. Imitation is not about perfection, it is about training. When athletes train, they do not expect every movement to be perfect. When musicians practice, they do not expect every note to be perfect. When you learn English, you should not expect every sentence to be perfect. The important thing is repetition. The important thing is showing up every day. Even 10 minutes a day can make a difference. Yes, really. If you do this every day, your English will begin to change. You will speak more easily. You will find words faster. You will sound more natural. And you will feel more confident. Confidence is another huge benefit of imitation. Many learners feel nervous because they do not know what to say. Their mind goes blank. They know some words, but they cannot build ideas quickly. They freeze. Imitation helps with that, because you are training your brain to take in a message and produce a message. Over time, that becomes easier. You start to trust yourself more. You stop thinking, I have to be perfect. And you start thinking, I can communicate. That change is powerful. Now let's talk about what kind of material you should use. Choose audio or video that is clear, natural, and not too difficult. Use something you can understand at least mostly. Maybe a simple podcast, maybe a short interview, maybe an easy YouTube video, maybe a slow English lesson, maybe a speech with clear pronunciation. The topic should also be interesting to you. If you like travel, Use travel videos. If you like daily life topics, use daily life content. If you like motivation, use motivational talks. Interest helps a lot. When you care about the topic, you pay more attention. And when you pay more attention, you learn better. Here is a simple practice routine you can follow. First, choose a short piece of audio, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. Second, listen once without stopping. Just listen for the general idea. Third, listen again more carefully. Notice useful words, expressions, and sentence patterns. Fourth, pause after one sentence or small section, then try to say the same idea in your own words. Fifth, continue until the end. Then, at the end, try to give the whole message again from memory in your own English. You can also record yourself. This is very helpful. When you record yourself, you can listen back. You can hear your pronunciation. You can notice where you hesitated. You can compare your version with the original. Do not do this to judge yourself too harshly. Do it to observe yourself. Be calm. Be honest. Be patient. Ask yourself simple questions. Did I communicate the same idea? Did I sound clear? Did I pause too much? Did I use natural words? Did I pronounce the words clearly? That is enough. You do not need to criticize every tiny detail. Just notice. Then improve a little next time. Also, do not be afraid to use simple English. This is very important. Some learners think good English means difficult English. That is not true. Good English means clear English. If you can express the same idea with simple words, that is wonderful. In fact, that is often better. For example, if the original speaker says something a little advanced, you can still imitate the message with easier language. That is completely fine. Maybe the speaker says, "I was absolutely exhausted after the meeting." You can say, "I was very tired after the meeting." Same meaning. Simple English, still useful. This builds fluency. Later, after more practice, you can slowly add richer vocabulary. But first, focus on communication. Imitation also helps you learn natural expressions. When people study only from textbooks, sometimes their English becomes correct, but not very natural. They know rules, but they do not know how people really speak. With imitation, you hear real patterns like, "That makes sense." "I'm not really into that." "It depends." "I ended up staying home." "I've been thinking about it." "That's not a big deal." These small expressions make a big difference. They make your English feel alive. And the more you hear them, imitate them, and use them, the more natural your speaking becomes. Now I want to encourage you not to rush. Go slowly. Really. Slow practice is good practice. If you go too fast, you may stop thinking deeply. You may only copy sounds. You may miss the structure. You may miss the meaning. But when you go slowly, you give your brain time. Time to understand. Time to notice. Time to build. Time to speak. And that is where growth happens. So please do not worry if you need to pause often. Do not worry if you need to listen many times. Do not worry if 1 minute of audio takes 15 minutes to practice. That is normal. That is training. And that training works. Let me say one more thing. You do not need to wait until you feel ready. A lot of people think, "I'll start speaking when my English gets better." But speaking is how your English gets better. So start now. Start with one sentence. Start with one short clip. Start with one small practice session. That is enough. You do not need a perfect plan. You do not need perfect motivation. You just need to begin. If you practice imitation every day, even for a short time, you are giving yourself something very valuable. You are building speaking ability step by step. You are teaching yourself how to express ideas. You are training your ear. You are training your mouth. You are training your confidence. And little by little, your English will become stronger. So let's review. Imitation is not only repeating words exactly, it is listening to a message and saying the same idea in your own words. This helps you improve sentence structure, vocabulary, grammar, fluency, and confidence. Start with small portions, then move to larger portions, then try full delivery. Use material that is clear, interesting, and not too difficult. Focus on meaning, not perfection. Use simple English when needed. Practice regularly. Record yourself if possible. And most importantly, keep going. You can do this alone. You can do this every day. And yes, this can truly improve your speaking. So after this video, choose one short piece of English audio and try it. Listen, pause, imitate, speak. One idea at a time. That is how progress happens. Slowly, clearly, naturally. And if you stay consistent, one day you will notice something beautiful. You will open your mouth, start speaking, and realize that English is coming out more easily than before. Not because you memorized everything, but because you trained your mind to think in English more naturally. And that is a wonderful feeling. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and keep believing that your English can grow every single day.